All right, let's get started. Thanks everyone for joining us today on this Thursday for HTML5 testing with Rebecca Hauck and Alan Greenblatt. Welcome, you guys. And with that, I am going to...
Thank you very much. Hey, everybody. This is Alan Greenblatt, Senior Creative Cloud Evangelist at Adobe. Welcome all to another edition of Adobe Tech Live. And today we have Rebecca, computer scientist at Adobe. She's been working for the past 15 years in all different aspects of testing and test methodologies and automation and infrastructure, and I'd say just generally delivering high-quality software. Now Rebecca, she's a WebKit contributor, and she's been contributing to W3C test infrastructures, and she's a test author on several CSS specs, but most importantly, and what we're going to talk about today is she's a key member, basically since inception, of Test the Web Forward, which some of you may or may not have heard about. I'm going to pass it along to Rebecca to tell you all about it, and we'll have for those of you that have not attended a Tech Live session before, there'll be there's a regular chat pod for people to just have discussions, and then there's a separate Q&A pod if you have particular questions for Rebecca, and we'll leave them for the end, and then at the end we'll go through the Q&As for Rebecca and have her answer those. And we are recording this, and so don't worry, everything will be posted on Tech Live and on the Tech Live YouTube channel. So without further ado, I bring you Rebecca.
Thank you, Alan. Good morning or good afternoon to everyone. That was a very nice introduction, but I do have a slide here about me. Alan already told you about me. I have the primary reason I'm talking to you today about Test the Web Forward is because I've been heavily involved with Test the Web Forward since the beginning, a little over a year ago. As well, I've written many W3C tests. So working on the web standards team here at Adobe, I'm sharing the knowledge of what I've learned over the last couple of years with the community. So I'm going to start with a quote from Tim Berners-Lee because it's really at the heart of the Test the Web Forward movement.
Hey, Rebecca. Yeah. Rebecca, sorry to interrupt you, but you need to share your screen again. Oh, it got disconnected. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
Perfect.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Paul. So he said, if I had taken proprietary control of the web, then it never would have taken off. People only committed their time to it because they knew it was open and shared and that they could help decide what would happen next. So now, over 20 years later, the web has indeed evolved as he envisioned it, and now the web really truly is defined by community. However, he also knew that this would cause exponential growth with contributions from many millions of people. So in 1994, he founded a standards body called the World Wide Web Consortium, or as you may have heard it referred to, the W3C. He knew that without a common set of standards, the web could and would quickly devolve into fragmented chaos, and it would ultimately be unsuccessful. So now standards are the root of communication for growing the web. And since we all come together through communication, standards are what bring us together on the web. So what exactly is a standard? Well, it defines how something should work, plain and simple. It's based in the W3C, it's based on the consensus of the community. A standard should be theoretically possible to implement before it's proposed. And then it should be proven that it can actually be implemented not just once, but more than once. If it can only be implemented one time and not repeated, then it's probably an anomaly or not standardizable because of too many variables or something. And in the W3C, the implementations need to pass a common test suite. That's how they prove their conformance to the standard. So how do they come to be? The standard starts with a document that's a draft. A draft is considered a work in progress. There are usually many, many, many updates that can span over years' time. We are actually using a lot of these, I'm using air quotes, prototypes in browsers today because people are so eager to get these technologies into the browser. They're often long existent in the browser before the draft standard becomes finalized. The draft advances on consensus, so all the iterations and all the change go through feedback loops of the working groups and the web developers out there. And we need tests along the way to prove these concepts, to prove these drafts, and to resolve on the details. I've seen many cases where working groups will go back and forth on a point of a spec, and ultimately they'll need to sketch out some tests that prove what the standard is trying to say, and the tests often help the issue become resolved. So after the draft phase, the next phase is it becomes a candidate recommendation, abbreviated as CR in the W3C. This is more firm than a draft. This is when the working group believes that the spec has everything that it needs. Implementations here are needed to validate that belief. So here's when the two implementations come into play. We may have one that's been experimental up until this point, but in order to get out of this phase, we need two, at least two. And tests are needed here for these two implementations to validate against and be to prove the interoperability from the start. And the last phase is the recommendation. This is the final official version. This is when we have the two implementations. Any further downstream vendors, browsers, implementers have the test suite to validate, yes, we've implemented this correctly. So this is a coverage report. So Toby Langell of Facebook, and he's currently the W3C test lead, and Robin Bergeon, the HTML5 spec editor, have been doing some work to create some test coverage data on some of the specs. This is a snapshot of the test coverage report for the HTML5 specs. And this is just a screenshot, so this was taken several months ago, but it's not that much different now. What they've done is they're parsing the language of the spec. So this is not code coverage where we know we're familiar with lots of the code coverage tools. This is parsing the language of the spec and doing some analysis using the word count, certain word analysis. The specs are written in a certain language that we can extract data from. Web ID much more we need to go. And we've done this for every spec, but this is the biggest one that most people are most concerned with. So I don't know if you can probably read that. So it's estimated that we need about 25,000 tests, and that we need more than 15,000 tests to get to final. And beyond that, all of the tests that get submitted to the repository have to be reviewed by someone. And that queue is pretty long. Right now, there's about 6,000 tests needing review. So those are some pretty giant numbers. And W3C and many of the working groups and many people involved in this effort are kind of wondering how are we going to get there? It seems like it might be an enormous mountain to climb. So the answer is pretty simple. We need more people, we need more tests, and we'll make a better web. So a little over a year ago, my colleagues and I started a movement called Test the Web Forward. We had our first event here in San Francisco at our office in June of 2012. We've had a number of events since then in Beijing, Paris, Sydney, Seattle, and our most recent one was in Tokyo in June. We have 2 more we're planning right now in Shanghai, actually in a couple of weeks, and Shenzhen, China later near TPAC, the annual W3C conference. We haven't done this alone. We've done this with partnerships from Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and more other sponsors and partners. And we've got a lot more coming soon. There's a few ideas that I can't, there's U.S. cities that are in the works right now that as soon as there's something somewhat sure, we'll put on our website. So what are these events? I'll get into the details of what actually happens at these events. There's an educational aspect about it. We teach you first kind of how you become a contributor, how you contribute, how do you write a test, how do you read a spec. We have experts that come and do presentations. So these are some of the experts we've had at past events that they're typically spec editors or people who are heavily involved in working groups and in test writing. These are just some of the examples of the things we teach you. There's a JavaScript testing framework that we walk everyone through. Ref tests are a certain example. It's a certain type of test that the W3C likes, and I'll walk you through a brief excerpt of what that is. This is actually the presentation that we give on how to write a ref test. This is just an excerpt of the tutorial that we give at the event, but the full tutorial is on the website. So ref test is something that you need to use to test something when you need to test something, how it renders visually. In other words, you can't use JavaScript to programmatically verify the output. You need to verify how it looks on the page. And it consists of 2 files, a test file and a reference file. Test file is one that uses the feature you're testing. So let's say you're testing the CSS border property. Your test file would contain some kind of element that applies the border property to it. Reference file will render exactly the same, but not using the border properties. There's many creative ways you can create a parallel or equivalent rendering using ref tests. Ref tests should be self-describing so that there's a sentence on the page that tells you how the test should look when it passes. This is more for the manual case, and it's very helpful when you're debugging tests when there's something that tells you what you should expect when it passes. And it should be cross-browser, and they're cross-browser and cross-platform. So how these are worked by most of the browser vendors is they automate the ref test running by loading them each in a browser, taking a screenshot, and doing an image comparison. And that's why these are ideal, and that's why they're cross-browser platform. Any pixel differences across Windows and Mac or Linux don't matter because you're generating the screenshots from the same source. So the next thing we do, so I'm going to walk you through a sample test case. This is a basic test case for the CSS transform spec. It's the transform property. This is actually a screenshot taken right from the spec that shows moving an element 100 pixels in both the X and Y direction. And sometimes writing tests, it's good to start with the examples because you get a nice little diagram like this and you can sort of visually see how the feature is supposed to work. Before I take you into the code, this is what a completed ref test looks like, and it's not very exciting. It's 2 files that look exactly the same, but that's what we want. Inside the code, the W3C likes some test metadata, and this is to help us track what kind of tests we have. That coverage report that I showed you earlier derives somewhat from this. This is how we know what sections of the spec we're testing. It'll include your name. It'll include the sections of the spec you're testing. And then the match link is the reference file. It just says this test matches this reference file. And then there's an assertion, a statement that says what the test is actually testing. Here is the test case. The transform property is where we're using the translate function. And in the reference file, we'll create the exact same rendering, but rather than use the transform function to place the div at that location, we'll just set the top and left. This is a technique we use in reference files where we add an element that's only visible when the test fails, and we like to use red and green. So we'll make a red div on the page that if the transform doesn't succeed, you'll see red. And then this is a simple sentence that tells you how the page is supposed to look if the test passes. You add the elements to the file, and here the important part is we put the red square prior to the green square in the DOM. You could also set the index exposed to the simplest. And the reference file just simply has your green square. And so this is what a failing test looks like. On the bottom example, the transform wasn't applied. So you can see the green square did not move over the red square, and it's very easy whether you're running this test manually or they're being compared programmatically to tell that this is a failing test. That's a basic quick walkthrough of a rep test. At the events then, we usually spend about a day hacking. And we have written tests for many specs. HTML5 is a big one, a handful of the CSS specs, transforms, backgrounds, and borders, values, and units. At the Tokyo event, we had some Flexbox tests, and that attendees there were particularly interested in text, fonts, and writing mode. So those are some interesting tests. At the Seattle event, a nice team came forward and wrote a bunch of tests for Pointer events. And the list goes on. And we're open to any specs being highlighted. It sort of depends on the experts we get to come and support attendees there. It depends on what specs need them the most, but the interest is, locally. So all of these events, the people are contributing. We've written over 2,000 new tests in the last year. Every single event, it's no surprise, we find interoperability bugs. We had a great one in Seattle where a guy wrote a test that every browser was doing it different and no browser was doing it right, which was great. We find spec bugs. Specs are also open to scrutiny at these things, and that's part of the process. They go through so many iterations, it's very easy for a spec to become nonsensical or impossible to implement, or even if it's a small thing like typos, these are good exercises for people who look really closely at the specs, and there's bug databases for them as well. I've seen people have come forward with their existing test suites and convert them to contribute them to the W3C phone gap at the Paris event. They converted a suite of phone gap tests and contributed them. And other people have come forward, and Mozilla converted a bunch of their Flexbox tests. We've also seen some side projects hacking on test infrastructure. We have, like I mentioned before, we have the test harness.js, which is a JavaScript testing framework. I've seen people enhancing and bug fixing on that. There's more test infrastructure work in progress right now, so I expect to see test report events using time there to collaborate. At every event, we produce more tutorials and more documentation. We've had so many good speakers and experts come forward and provide materials. We're really accumulating a nice, rich set of documentation and information for people wanting to get started. And we're building a community. I think the events are super fun. People get to network. The attendees, one of the most popular aspects of the events is the attendees, particularly people like in these other countries, they get to meet the editors of the spec. They get to sit there, for a day and work with, Santa Sielica, who's an editor on many CSS specs. And for some people, if they're not in the Silicon Valley or they're not in the Bay Area, this is very attractive, and I think it extends after the event, because when you work with somebody in person, you feel more comfortable sort of reaching out to them and communicating with them online afterwards. And so we feel like we're really building a better web. This crowdsourcing thing is catching on, and people are really excited, and the enthusiasm is very high for Web 4 and for what we're doing. So we're always asking other people to join the movement. Come to an event. There's lots of sponsorship opportunities, partnerships. If you're in an area where you think you have a community group or an area where you think Web 4 would be well suited, talk to us. We can talk about getting even, it doesn't have to be a big hackathon. It can be one easy meetup. Write tests. I mean, like I said, we have a lot of information there now as a result of all these events, and we're also building up some more formal documentation that should go live soon. you don't have to come to an event. You can get going now. There's information, but you can certainly reach out to the Test the Web Forward community. Our mail list is big with hundreds of attendees, and reach out. That's it. So our main website is testthewebforward.org. We have a public W3C mail list that I encourage you to subscribe to. We just started a monthly newsletter series there, so you can stay up with when events are coming in the area. There's our Twitter information, and my name is Rebecca Hauck. And that's it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Welcome.
So that was excellent. That was excellent. I'm going to switch this over.
I'm going to see if I can paste this into the chat pod so I can see the meeting room now, if that's okay.
Okay, that was really dumb. First thing I did is I accidentally just cleared the Q&A pod.
Oh, no.
I still apologize. Well, I totally apologize, everyone. That was really dumb. But as I was looking at the Q&A pod there, I can't believe I did that. I think one of the main questions I saw there was people asking about Adobe's involvement in W3C and how many people we have involved and do we have people involved with the
That's a good question. Yeah, we have lots of people involved, and we actually have for many years. I've been working on the web standards team at Adobe for a couple of years, and it's a relatively young team. But prior to that, we've had people working with the W3C since the very beginning. Adobe's been a member. Recently, though, since we've got this bustling web platform division now, our membership has grown a lot. On my team personally, I'm working with 4, 5, 6 people working actively in the CSS working group. But yeah, still answered it right there. It's about 60 people company-wide.
Excellent, excellent. So now I think you mentioned this at the beginning when you were talking about the schedule. When is the next Test the Web event in the U.S.? Do you know?
So there's a couple of ones that we've just started early conversations with that I can't put on a website anywhere, but I can mention Boston and DC. We're also doing a meetup in Sacramento in September. That won't be a hackathon. It'll probably be more like an information session, what I just did here. But to get the Sacramento HTML5 user group engaged and on board with the movement. And we may see if there's interest there then afterwards to do a hackathon with them. So those are the things that are being discussed. The Sacramento one is for sure. The Boston and the DC are just an early discussion. But if anyone is on the line that is interested in participating in one of those, please do reach out to us.
Okay, someone's asking what the Twitter handle is. I think
I was going to paste that right here. And where's a good place to paste that in the room?
Just put it in the right pod. Type it right in the Q&A pod.
Okay, let's hopefully this pastes okay. Oh, that didn't paste very well. Sorry.
But it's at Test the Web Forward. Is that it? Oh, FWD?
No, it's spelled out. Erase mine. No, it's spelled out. I'm sorry.
Sorry. So ignore mine. I'm doing a wonderful job here. So ignore mine. Oh, are you sure? Mine is correct? I'm just looking on.
Right.
I'm just looking on Twitter, and I'm just copy pasting from Twitter, and I've got.
Oh, really? Okay. Sorry about that. Then I had a typo on my side.
The last one is correct. Sorry for the confusion, everybody. It is at Test the Web FWD. Thank you, Sylvette. So, one of the things that's I've always wondered about is, I'm actually based in Boston, and there there's been events in Seattle and, was it Tokyo, I think it was? So what can I do from how can I contribute, or how can someone contribute if there's not an event in your city? And, so I can't attend an event right now, or maybe there won't be an event anywhere near me for another year or so, but is there anything I can do in the interim?
Yeah, so we are, like I mentioned, we have some formalized documentation. Right now the website has a good number of resources. At the very bottom of the main testtheweb4.org page, there's a resources section that has copies of all of the educational, all the how to write a ref test, how to write a JavaScript test, how to read a spec. There's information for all of that. In conjunction, the W3C, we're working with Toby Langell and the W3C to have sort of centralized W3C testing documentation center, and it's going to be served off of testthewebforward.org. It will be going live very soon, in the next couple of weeks, and it's all of the information you have there, plus we've had a lot of people contributing and writing more stuff. So all the information to get you started is there to do with sort of a self, training. But certainly I would encourage you to reach out to the community. I mean, the public Test Web Forward mailing list, like I said, has many, many past attendees. And part of this movement is to build that community. I think it only gets stronger when we're working together and helping each other. There are channels in the W3C that working group members are on all the time. There's always someone all around the clock, 24 hours, because they're all over the world, available to answer questions. And even if it's something that's already documented out there, we're happy to point you in the right direction.
Excellent, excellent. So now, let's say, it sounds like there's talk of a web event coming. Let's say there wasn't. Is there anything I can do to say, hey, I think there's enough of a community here. I'd love it if there was in my town.
Yeah. So we've also developed kits to help people. If say you run a user group, or you're engage with a community that you think could be interested in attending a W3C, a Test Web Forward event, we have an event kit. Well, actually two. We have a meetup kit, something if you wanted to plan something small, one evening. And we also have a full plan on how you do a two-day event like we've done in the past, where there's the educational part and then the full-day hacking. Certainly, and in fact, the two cities that I mentioned, Boston and DC, are actually coming from non-Adobe, other people that are interested in putting on their phones. In Seattle, as a matter of fact, Microsoft did that without us. We helped a little bit, but they pretty much drove that. So also in the bottom of the website.
Sorry, I was just saying that's a pretty key issue. This is not just an Adobe event. This is a web event.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we had the first one here, and we started it, but we really want this to be a full community, not just the attendees, but the leaders on the Adobe and Google and Microsoft have been our great friends in this and have helped us a lot. We actually co-organized the Tokyo event with Google, and we held it at their office in Tokyo. But we're looking for more people to come on and host. So in the resources section at the bottom of the website, there is a meetup kit link that has links off to, if you want to read through kind of just what we sort of just wrote down everything we learned along the way on doing the big event. And we are available to help you, help consult with you and get you going and answer questions along the way.
Right. All right. So there was a question from Vikrant. Basically wants to understand, if there's mobile browser coverage for these tests, and how that works.
Well, we're not exactly. I'm careful how I say this. We aren't exactly testing specific browsers. We're testing W3C specs. So any mobile browser that implements any part of those specs would, yes, then be covered. I mean, we have not yet had a mobile-focused event, like say where we pull together all the specs that most impact mobile browsers. But that would be a really cool one that I think a lot of people would be interested in. So if the mobile browser implements any part of the spec we're testing, then yes.
Okay, cool. Vikrant, does that answer your question? Cool. So I guess the last thing is, I was thinking is, what if I have a bunch of tests that I have a bunch of tests. Is there a way I could contribute them, like a nice
Yeah.
suite?
Yeah. So this is a good issue because we've had some small test suites contributed, like PhoneGap's test suite was relatively small compared to, say, WebKit's test suite or Mozilla's test suite. But converting your tests to the format the W3C wants is an exercise that may be worth doing. If it's too technically complicated, Toby Langell has said a number of times he's open to ideas or hearing about, maybe the W3C should expand their JavaScript test framework support to, I don't know, some other popular frameworks out there like Jasmine or something. So yes, a lot of shops have their own test suites to validate their implementations. We know they exist. In fact, as we've talked about this a lot, getting all of those contributed to the W3C so that we're all sharing each other's test suites would be a really excellent thing, and maybe even a better path to pursue than writing whole new tests just to conform to the one format.
Okay, cool. So, that's the questions I had. If you have questions for Rebecca while we're here, please enter them in the chat pod, the Q&A pod ideally. We'll stick around for a bit, but Rebecca, thank you so much. This is really informational and informative, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk here. And and one of the things. Absolutely. Now, for those of you on the line, we're also, if there's enough interest, we're one of the things we'd consider doing is, some follow-on TechLive presentations where, maybe we'll actually figure out a way to do a Test the Web event in a TechLive session, or if there's more, people want to actually understand how to write tests in detail. Any ideas people have, we have some different ideas, but if there's enough interest in doing this, please let us know. Let us know here, or tweet, or put on the Facebook page, because if there's enough interest, absolutely, we'll do that. And I think there's a lot of interesting potential there, not having to have full events all over the world, but be able to just do it here online. There's potential for that.
Yeah, we have not yet done a virtual event, but we are having some remote and virtual participation at some of the events. The last two events, we've had people log on from their respective time zones in Europe or Asia and review tests. But we would like to try to do a full virtual where we do the tutorial with viewers online, and maybe we hack together and sit in a chat room and sort of share our testing experiences there.
Excellent. I think, Sarah's saying that she'd like to get her more hands-on test examples so that she can start doing tests on her applications. We'd like to see a tech session on that. Does that make sense? Or
Say that again?
Well, I'm just reading. So Sarah said, I'd like to get more hands-on test examples so that I can start doing tests on my application.
Yeah. I'm assuming you mean sort of sample tests. Our tests are basically HTML files, so you load them in a browser and you run the test. If you want hands-on test examples, I would actually recommend that you just check out the W3C test repository itself and browse through the test. And start small, start with one area, start with a simple one like, CSS backgrounds or something. And running them in an automated way is a different conversation though, and there's going to be more information available soon on how anybody can just pull them down and run them automated.
Right. Okay. And there is design. Yeah, I guess, I mean, it would come down to, or is it a particular spec related to that we're
Yeah, I mean, you're probably going to want to test media queries and certain things like that. At the spec level, you're testing the pieces of the spec, but sometimes the more interesting tests are when you sort of integrate, two specs. And we do have a number of those kinds of tests in the repository where, we're testing media queries with a certain kind of layout, maybe a flex box or something like that. But again, I want to emphasize that these are focused on the specs themselves. So you have to extract what are the W3C specs that are behind the responsive design feature.
Right.
So then there's another repository too. Do you know where there's two CSSs separate? Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Excellent. Okay, I'm just looking at some of the chat. Let people get on with that. Yeah, so we'll stick around for another 5 minutes or so. So I'm going to move this here. You can continue asking questions, but I appreciate if people can just fill out the final polls. I hope you all appreciated this. I hope this was informative, and I hope you enjoyed it. And please do come back to further Adobe Tech Live events and spread the word, get more people coming to these, and let us know if you have other ideas for things you'd like to hear talks and discussions on. And well, thank you very much. And thank you especially.
Yeah, and feel free to follow up with me directly if you have any other questions, or if I imagine if you start looking at tests and actually want to get your hands on something, more questions will arrive. I'm happy to answer them for you, or try to redirect you to the best person who can.
Thank you, Flora. Excellent. One last, Kevin's asking, what are official ways to test things related to W3 specs on touch-based interactions people would want to have with their browser?
Is the question, how do you execute the test or write the test?
Touch-based interactions. How would
I'm not sure I entirely understand the question. The touch-based interactions, however they're defined in the specs, I'm not sure that I understand the question.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the things that maybe is confusing is that
yeah. Without fingers. Yeah, so this is an execution question.
Are you able to see the Q&A pod, Rebecca?
Yeah, I am. This isn't how we execute the test question. That's what I thought it was. Yeah, so this is the W3C right now has a spec for something called WebDriver, which is automated browser testing framework. That it's actually Selenium. It's already kind of out there as Selenium, but they're standardizing it so that it can be implemented everywhere the same way. I have not been following the details of the WebDriver progress that much, but I'm almost certain they're acknowledging this case. So I would encourage you to actually look at Selenium and read the WebDriver spec and reach out to those folks. I would bet there's a lot of conversation about this. And at some point, the W3C is going to adopt WebDriver and provide a way for people to run these tests automated in sort of a hosted environment. So there might be your answer, but I don't think there's anything working today for that.
Arturo was asking if we could just post more of the recordings to YouTube. So yeah, sorry, some of those taken a little while to get up onto YouTube, some of the past recordings. Everything should be on the archives of Adobe Tech Live, but it takes a little longer to get it up onto YouTube. But we'll do our best to get everything up there, including this one. As soon as it's finished, we'll get it up onto the Adobe Tech Live archives, and then we'll post it up on YouTube. So.
Well, thanks for your good questions and for your interest. And again, feel free to reach out to me directly if you've taken a look at some of the tests or looked through some of the materials and have more questions.
Excellent. All right, I think we are just about done here. There's a few more people potentially asking questions. Trying to type some things. No. Give you all 30 seconds. All right. I think we're good. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Rebecca. We'll talk to you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.